from Studio Prithvi, this lovely facility very kindly provided to us by Prithvi Theatre. Hi.
Thank you, Sued. Hi. Thank you for having me here.
Manjari, we are looking forward to this poetry session. Your memoir that came out recently is causing quite a splash. I keep reading a lot of coverage about it in the mainstream and in the niche literary press. So, congratulations.
Thank you. Have you bought
Uh,
it?
I have placed an order. It is, yes, indeed. And it's such a lovely cover, too, by the way.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a lovely cover. I had nothing to do with the cover, so I can brag about it.
Yes, 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 yes. And today, in fact, we are going to be discussing Manjari's poetry, which is also fabulous. We have had a taste of her poetry in her chapbook, which is Dental Hygiene is
Very
very
important.
important, which had a lot of pathos and a lot of sadness, but also a lot of humor to it. So it's something that really strikes me very distinctively about her poetry. So Manjari, just to get the conversation rolling, how has this lockdown been treating you? How has the lockdown
Oh
treated you?
God. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I feel like I can't complain much about the lockdown because I have a house and my room and I don't know things to do. I suppose. Uh, but really, like I'm kind of tired. Like I've not written anything most of this year. It's just I'm really waiting for the vaccine to come out. So the things just are over now. Yeah, I think I'm getting a little bit of cabin fever. I really want to
Oh my
run
God.
away.
I know. Yes, heading for the hills is something that I fantasize about too.
Yeah,
But
seriously.
yes, yes, yes. But again, to get the kind of strike rate that you've gotten, two books placed with Westland, is amazing. I believe your poetry has also been accepted by Westland, right?
Yeah, it's coming out next year.
Wonderful, wonderful. Is there a title decided yet, or is that still under wraps?
No, it'll be called Origami Eye.
Oh, wonderful. It's a lovely title, but would you like to dwell a little bit about that title? Would you like to talk a little bit about it?
So Origami Eye basically is just one of the phrases that I've used in a poem that I will be reading today. The poem is entitled Origami Birds, and in which I'm talking about like how I want to carry my mother or like an image of my mother everywhere with me so that she can protect me. So my mother is sort of like one of my writerly, poetic, whatever preoccupations, and I'm trying to understand her and the domestic space through her. So I mean, which is why the title is Origami Eye, because my poems will be heavily about my mother in this particular collection. Yeah.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. So they are very thematically united. They are a sequence, so to say.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
will you be reading from your soon to be published manuscript today?
So some poems, yes. Some of my new material, I thought I have an audience, I must try it out. So some poems will be new, and that might, I don't know, be a part of another collection if I ever get down to actually putting it together. But yeah, some poems from Origami Eye as well, definitely.
Wonderful, wonderful. I mean, and the others that are not from Origami Eye, they are in a different vein, or
Yeah,
uh,
some about some are love poems, some are about mental health. I think mental health primarily is one of the focus of a lot of my poetry recently, and a certain preoccupation with language, I think. So that also is one of the things I'm looking into. Though I don't know how successful I have been so far, because again, this year has been such a waste in terms of writing anything. So let's see. I'll be
I'm
reading a
sure
few.
I'm
Yeah.
sure they're fabulous. I'm sure they're fabulous. Because I have read your work before. I've read your chapbook,
Mm.
and I was quite taken by it. And really, we need more of work that the kind of work that you're doing. So, what would you like to kick off the proceedings with? How about a nice poem that to begin with?
Right. The first one will be one of my I poems. Uh, it's called Load Shedding. I brings back Geeta Dutt to life tonight as she admonishes her lover, Ja, 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 Bewafa. In a game of Antakshari, she can never lose. Every time she pokes a needle into her stomach, her insulin resistance breaks through her skin, and cracks in her voice grow branches. In a cement tank overflowing with sand, where a lonely dog sits every morning, I take his place in this night of government supplied darkness. When I fans me with the events of yesterday, death, decay, destruction, the usual, an ant colony takes a stroll out of my dress and abandons me mid sentence. By the time we return to light, our faces have been altered for the sake of belonging. I grates her fingers to fit into her new body, and we follow her footsteps. And our grated fingers are turned into wall hangings with pretty tassels. I slip into the sand with ease now. My breasts have been chiseled. They gouge through palms. These hands won't close your eyes anymore. Thereafter, with our grated fingers, we return to life with hopes of forgetting the people we once used to be.
Wow. It's there are so many beautiful lines and it just comes together so beautifully. I was it was a beautiful journey you took us on.
Thank you. Do you read
So
another one? Or
yes,
yeah,
please. Yes,
sorry.
please. No, please go ahead.
No,
Go ahead.
you were asking something. You can go ahead.
Yes, my. I mean, it's a very non-writerly question. Please excuse it if it is completely impertinent. But how does your mother react to your poetry? What is her take on your poetry? Is she your alpha reader, your beta reader, your whatever reader, or is she not?
She reads sometimes, mostly listens more than reading. Um, and she complains a lot that I sort of have exposed her to the world, and I don't have any beautiful things to say about, like how other children are saying that their mother is a great cook or is so beautiful. I constantly write about her ailments, and she complains about that. But it's okay. I mean, she's happy that I'm writing about her. I mean, then I remind her that none of her friends have kids who are writing about their mothers at all. And then she's like, yeah, okay, fine.
Wonderful, wonderful. And how? When did you begin to write about your mom? When did this whole sequence of poems that would later become Origami Eye, or poems that would become that would center around mental health? When did this sort of sequence begin, and how did it begin? What was, of course, there's no single trigger, but how did it begin?
So I think I sort of was getting into the idea of domestic space like around my mid 20s. I started with my grandmother. So like my first chapbook, the chapbook was largely focusing on my grandmother, and it felt like a natural progression. It sort of like came naturally to me that I move from my grandmother to my mother, and maybe eventually I think about it like maybe eventually I will write about myself after I'm done with writing about these two women. But I mean, yeah, I think around the same time when I felt very exhausted by writing about my grandmother, I moved to writing about my mother. And also, I think like academically, my preoccupations were growing within like this spatial theory and domestic space, especially. A lot of reading of Deleuze in my MA days, and so I would say that Deleuze also was one of the people who sort of pushed me towards writing about my mother. Yeah.
I see. And what? So basically, we'll come to the craft of how you go about it. We'll talk about craft a little bit later. But do you feel ready to read another poem?
Yeah, sure. Another mother one. This one is called My Mother Sings Disco Divane. When I am 7, I undergoes a surgery to remove cysts blocking her breasts. I fall asleep in the math class and dream of her. She wears a hipster red headband in my dream, like Rekha. In Ek To Comes in the Gani, but sings a different song. Rekha, my mother's namesake, tries to wake me up. But Judy Jones, my class teacher, pushes her away, and I don't get a gold star for my homework that day. When she comes back from the hospital, I ask her about the song she was singing in my dream. She teaches me Raat aur Din Diya Jale that night, and I win our colony's Sare Gama Pa with popular consensus. So I get to sit on the lap of Azuba's friend for as long as I like. I's stomach bears three biblical crosses from a recent gallbladder removal surgery, with the stretch marks from two pregnancies and several small scars from the insulin needle crowding her stomach. I's body is the bloodiest site of worship. She complains of being addicted to laxatives. Every night, she drinks 10 ml of empty and jokes about it not emptying her stomach well enough. She wakes up from her afternoon nap saying it would be great if I could pass some gas, and starts singing Disco Divani as if it is the cure for constipation. I, the pop sensation of the 80s, is back again today. Uh huh.
It's there's the one thing I noticed. I think I've read this poem somewhere before online, and I was immediately struck then, as I am now, by the tenderness behind the humor. And that's what really, that's what that poem really left me with. Of course, every reader reads a poem differently, but that was my
Yeah.
personal take on it.
Yeah.
And which actually, brings us to this question of, the one thing that this poem has is, it has this almost effortless air to it, which I'm aware is completely not necessarily the way that it would have come out. Right? There's redrafting, there's writing, there's rewriting. Can you give us a little
Yeah.
insight into that process as pertains to this poem in particular?
I think like this is one of those poems where I'm not really trying to create a character. That like one a few things that are in the poem actually happened. So it was a question of just putting together like various incidents from my life. I think this is one of those poems that was born out of like a lot of conversations with my mother that was having in a particular afternoon, and whatever she was saying just like kept striking me. So I was like, okay, I need to write it down. So like the first draft happened in my diary, which was basically just note taking, and then I put it together, sent it to like a few friends, and they gave me some feedback, and then I reworked on it. The regular process, right? Like we have to work and rework, and then I finally sent it out to TBLM. TBLM was the place that had published this one. And
That's right.
Tanuj also had like I think a few things to say, but I didn't make any changes after that because it gets tiring. Uh, but I mean, yeah, it just is like sometimes I feel like I just need to sit together and sit like in one place and put like some memory events together. Sometimes like writing a poem is that sort of a process, like a memoirist process for me, collecting memories and then sort of knitting a pattern out of them.
Very well said. That's actually a template for a certain kind of poem that can be that can be written. What have you got for us next?
So this one is the title poem from the next collection, Origami Birds. Like all children of a certain era, I was taught to be great at origami. My airplanes, they were called aeroplanes then, would fly long distances, carry my messages to my one best friend, because sometimes it wasn't safe to walk alone. And aeroplanes were the safest way of traveling known to mankind. My fifth standard geography teacher had once told me. Each year, when the monsoons arrived, I built paper boats, and the boats I built never sank. They were built to save drowning ants, so when I died and went wherever one is supposed to go when one dies, I'd have an army of all the ants I saved and that one moth who'd jump aboard without permission but was never asked to leave. Yere yere pausa tula deto paisa. We all sang in anticipation, praying to the rain gods for an early monsoon. The sooner I saved the ants, the better it was for my reputation. I could have been an origamist if I had known about such a profession. I could always make beautiful pink swans. I had learned how to make birds that could fly, birds that did fly. For I only learned how to make migratory birds, and they don't come back. And you aren't supposed to wait for them either. What I didn't create, what I couldn't create was I. What I really wanted to create was I. So I could carry my origami I with me wherever I went. So she could keep me safe wherever I went. I read in a poem once, because there is no better place to learn about physical symptoms of trauma than a poem, that if you weren't letting yourself grieve a death, if you are holding back tears, you're going to give yourself a serious ear infection. When I read that poem, I was scared. I have been in the process of tearless grieving for the past decade. My grief is anticipatory. It is awaiting a tragedy. My grief is my leitmotif. It sneaks in everywhere, in my poetry, in my dreams, in my life. The writer of the poem, or the woman in it, had lost her mother, but she couldn't cry, so the ear infection. My anxiety prepares me for nothing. It just redefines my traumas and gives me new reasons to worry. So I am always confused. What is it that I worry about? That I will get an ear infection or I won't ever get one? When I die someday and they open my body for examination, what they will find are my organs, clumped together in fear, in anticipation of something terrible about to happen. When your life becomes silent, asymptomatic trauma, no pre-mortem reports can postpone your tragedies, and no post-mortem reports will tell them what killed you. Because when have you ever read a report that cited the patient was healthy, but she died because she had to? It's a common cause of death in those suffering from anticipatory grief. She was always a lost cause as a cause of death.
Wow, that's absolutely. It's heart touching, but it's also it's a profound, circular meditation on obsessive fear.
Yeah,
It's
obsessive
a
fear.
beautiful poem. Sorry,
Thank you. Obsessive fear. I am obsessed with a lot of things. Hypochondriac.
but it's a beautiful poem. I mean, we work with what is uppermost on our minds, and the
Yeah.
way you woven it into really beautiful poetry is truly a joy to listen to.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for this poem. I mean, you're saying stuff that a lot of us really feel when you're putting it so well into words. A lot of people will probably gain a lot of insight about themselves on reading your work.
Thank you.
Uh, so, so what's the next poem about?
This is not an I poem. It's called In My Dream. Szymborska reads poetry. I'm trying to write a love poem here. I'm not really very good at it, so bear with me. I often forget to breathe when I dream about you. Sleep apnea is a potentially fatal disease. Did you know that? Especially if there is no one to wake you up and you are never here. In my dream, we meet at conferences in clothes you and I would never wear, in languages you and I will never speak. You and I sit in coffee shops, don't acknowledge each other, carrying unspecified anger, unaddressed resentment. You don't look like you, I don't look like me. And I like it this way. Szymborska, in her poem True Love, wonders, true love, is it really necessary? Thank goodness that she answers her own question. Or where would you and I be? The conclusion always is that it is necessary, just not for you. As you often tell me, We meet in hallways, we meet in hotel lobbies, in museum corridors, in queues for two separate buses. We're never taking the same route, never walking the same pathways. It is why, she says, true love could never populate the planet in a million years. It comes along so rare. What can we even do? Like Szymborska in her dream chats with Ecclesiastes, I chat with her in fluent Polish. We talk of love, we talk of poetry. How poets now call themselves poets. How lovers now don't call themselves lovers. We don't ever come up in these You don't ever come up in these conversations, but you're always present. Such are the frivolities I say for my dreams. I don't know what language you speak in. I don't know your name either. I cannot call you, even if I want to. It's only your ravaged face, your crooked teeth, your tobacco stained from smoking too many cigarettes that I remember. Like Alice, I followed the white rabbit. And now you are not you and I am not me. This is what happens when you swallow pills you aren't supposed to. When I said don't eat the food given to you by strangers, this is what she was warning against. When I was in school, I used to feed rabbits kept in cages the food I could not finish. It is only befitting that they pay me back by feeding me their leftovers. That night we spent together, I already knew I had lost you. By the time morning arrived, you had lost many syllables. You were eating words for breakfast, swallowing them with the lukewarm tea you and I drank half heartedly. When there is nothing, there is language, you said. When there is no language, there is love. I responded silently and smiled. It is why, when I expressed despair, Szymborska whispered in my ears, let the people who never find true love keep saying that there is no such thing. Their faith will make it easier for them to live and die. Let's listen to her.
Beautiful, absolutely beautiful. The whole, uh, especially the part of the morning after, when the person is swallowing syllables and then entire words. It's absolutely beautiful. It's just brings the whole thing home for me.
Thank you.
Loved it. Is this also part of the collection, or this is a separate poem altogether?
No, no, I don't think so. I haven't really decided, but this is not like this wasn't in the original manuscript. I may not add it either. I don't know.
Okay. So tell us about the manuscript. You said that it was not written in the lockdown. So it was written beforehand. When
Yeah,
was
yeah,
it?
yeah. Yeah. So I got the deal. It was last year, like 2019 is when I got the book deal anyway. So the manuscript was ready. I think I was putting it together when I was in Finland in 2018. So it sort of has been in the works for like a couple of years at least. But it was my agent Kanishka who sort of pushed me towards submitting it, because I don't think I was even feeling very prepared to get into that process, because I was already working on one book, and it was exhausting enough. And then I was like, okay, but I sent him whatever I had, and then he did what he does best and got me a deal. So I mean, yeah, that was that. But like, yeah, this lockdown has I haven't even touched it. I've not even edited it. I will start editing it in like hopefully a month's time. But right now I'm too drained from the book in itself, like the previous one. So yeah.
I was just going to ask you that whether this has been a process of recharging the batteries because of the strain caused by the first book.
Yeah,
So yeah,
this is I mean, I've been trying to sort of take a break and not do anything, but not doing anything is really not easy.
yeah.
So so I mean, there is always something, and I'm not able to like prioritize what is it that I want to do. Is it that like I don't want to do anything, or like I have some new projects that I've sort of thought of and made notes on? So do I want to work on that, or do I want to like, I don't know, like I've just like I've been all over the place right now, but I'm sort of trying to take some distance from this book. Like I keep getting messages from people, and sometimes they become a little overwhelming. So I'm trying to not get too deeply sucked into this entire process of, you know, because the nature of the book is also such that like the messages that people send you are also a little personal in nature, and sometimes you don't want to engage with that.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's that in itself is very stressful and
Yeah.
straining.
Yeah.
So halfway, we are halfway through the session, and so let's continue with a little more poetry.
Okay.
What have you got for us next?
This one is called Chocolate Dipped Worms Are Delicious. Being the older child of my parents, I shouldn't have been given hand me downs, but there were always a few. A wooden horsey that belonged to a cousin was being passed down generation after generation, like a prized possession, a family heirloom. Baba never had any siblings except for a dead sister he never met. So he couldn't give me anything. Just yesterday, as he finished his daily routine of morning exercise, he said to me, I'm sure I've given you something. What? I'll find out soon. I, on the other hand, will never have trouble recalling all her gifts to me. She hands me her glucometer and says, take it. The error margin is 15%. Always deduct that. Always. Illness to me is a math test. I know I will eventually fail. Q&A. Where do you get your terrible quality hair from? Mother, of course. When Sri Devi's daughter is born as Sri Devi and marries the man who wanted to marry Sri Devi, what do you call it? Redemption. Where do you get your body weight from? Mother, of course. Do you think gluttony is a sin you should be killed for? I like the floppiness of my body. Can you list all your hand me downs? Glucometer, wooden horsey, anxiety, candy doll, diabetes, kanjivaram sari, depression, and dental hygiene. Why were you visited by a farting cat in your dream? Scatological humor always works. Which is your favorite hand me down? Glucometer, of course, it's high tech. Is the farting cat funnier than Sridevi and Chalbaz? Of course. Where do you get your hormonal imbalances from? Mother, of course. When relatives come from abroad, what do they bring? Pringles, Twix candy, and condescension. Does the water in your house smell like someone dead? It smells like Aji. Do you think worms are our ancestors? Chocolate dipped worms have the potential to be delicious. What happens when you tell a joke to a dead baby? Everyone laughs. What happens when you eat your ancestors? Genetic mutation. Are you a proud daughter of I? Of course.
I think this is probably my most favorite one so far. And again, there is such tenderness behind the humor. There is so much more behind the humor that can subjectively be unpacked by each readers independently. But it's beautiful. It's there's a lot of layering I can feel in your poetry. There's a
Yeah.
lot behind the humor that that is that can be felt in a very visceral sense.
Humor
But
is one of
tell
the coping mechanisms we have developed now, haven't we? All of us who
Yes.
have sort of been struggling with like various mental illnesses. Humor helps.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Uh, Also, what helps, I think, is a healthy interest in popular culture,
Ah,
which in your case seems to be Hindi movies of a particular vintage.
yeah, totally. I wouldn't even know if we can call it healthy obsession anymore or healthy interest anymore. I mean, yeah, I'm totally seeped into popular culture, Bollywood especially.
I do believe that so Sri Devi is definitely one of those interests, is she not?
course, I mean, Devi is a very fascinating character. I think this poem was also written around when she died, so it's sort of like was like remembering Devi in a certain way, and like unexpected dying, and death is one of my preoccupations anyway, like at least my poetic preoccupations. So it sort of like came together. But like uh, I've always been a Madhuri Dixit fan, team Madhuri Dixit. So, so it also felt like cheating a little bit, but I mean, yeah, all these people have been sort of part of my growing up years, and cinema was a constant escape for me from everything, like from all kinds of violence around us. So,
Yes. And so let's move on with some more poetry, shall we?
yeah, this one is called Lonely Cities. Loneliness, says Olivia Liang in The Lonely City, is a chronic disease without redeeming features. It is a chronic disease, it never leaves you, but it does vacate my heart when your memory creeps in secretly, silently. Reminds me of the time when I asked you, what do you like most in the world? You, you had said without thinking. When I think of that, I'm not lonely anymore. I gather you in every poem I read. Love and cough, says Anne Sexton, can't be hidden. Not even a small love, not even a small cough. Ours was a small love. It was over before it could begin. But my friends will tell you how annoyed they are with the recurring memories of our betrayal. I can't hide you even if I want to. You told me you hid broken cigarettes from yourself. It is how you're working on giving them up. You don't know how to quit cold turkey. I should have known your lies then. No one breaks cigarettes into pieces, stores them away for good. Bad habits find their way back. Like they did. My therapist tells me a subconscious mind turns words into images, a corollary that could be the conscious mind turning images into words then. I often hear you saying things you did not say, read things you did not write. I am a reader no writer dreams of. Or maybe every writer wants someone like me who reads her story in every book, who listens for love in every sentence. Yes, even a small love. I often think of myself as a woman trapped in an Edward Hopper painting. I am naked in my lonely desires. I am dressed in my suburban loneliness. I am surrounded by buildings, by people, by noise of honking cars, the pedestrian chatter, buzzing phones. But there is silence written all over my body. People don't talk in his paintings, no matter where they are. People can't escape them either. When you leave me, it is where you leave me. When you go, you really go. And loneliness, the permanent resident of this body, comes back. It is silly to read a book about a lonely woman who moved cities to heal from broken love. It is silly that I have been that woman, and now that you are gone, I am that woman again. How many cities can one leave to mend what is broken? The world does not have enough cities. It's good that you made no promises of return. Now that I have found myself in this lonely city, I'll leave it when I am ready to leave you. Cities devour people. It is hard to tell one from another in the crowded glare of consumerism. It is why we are lonely and loveless. We can't stand one another. We are all alike in our self loathing. When it's time to exit the canvas of a city, I'll leave you behind in the hotel room we made love in. Your scent, your half broken cigarettes, that towel you borrowed from me, your kisses, everything will be locked away. It is time, my love, I found a new lonely city. It is time I gave up on you, ended you, like this poem, poorly, cautiously, with love.
Absolutely beautiful. I think I think you're selling yourself short when you say you don't write good love poems.
I don't know.
It's
I mean,
absolutely
it's so many
absolutely
people have
memorable.
written about it, right? So it's one of those subjects that like where you absolutely have nothing new to offer. Sometimes I do wonder why I even write about it.
And yet one must sometimes, right? I mean, one has to get it out
Yeah,
to I don't know if you feel similarly, but I suppose sculpting something through words is also a way of redeeming it.
yeah, I agree.
So maybe that's why we write love poems, even though it's all been said and done before.
Yeah, there's nothing new you can offer, but I suppose it's necessary to repeat certain things. I don't know.
Absolutely, absolutely, for a new generation.
Yeah,
Say it in a different way, maybe. Although I must say that the poems that you read today, they have that freshness about them. There's nothing hackneyed or cliched at all. It's all very. It seems very new. So I think
thank you.
that's a very and I'm really struck by how layered they are. About how, as you pointed out, they are a series of memoiristic vignettes
Hmm.
strung into a pattern, but that pattern is comes together beautifully.
Thank
So
you.
sorry. So would you like to continue with another poem?
Yeah, sure. This one, it's another I poem. It's called The Gift That Keeps Giving. My therapist thinks I am maladaptive. When I tell him, I sneak up on I and check for her breathing night after night. One time, when I was alone at home, watching television the way Azuba had warned me against, for good reason, someone walked into our house and never left. The night of horrors remains etched in my memory. A thief smiled at me and stole our blind tenant's handbag. The next day, she slipped and cracked open her head. Worms were eating her eyes from the inside. They threw wet mud in her skull and planted some apple seeds. Some worms are nutritious for the soil. When my eye's eye died, I was alone, dreading she might insist on meeting me. She smelled like water in her death, a deep blue scar glistening on her forearm. She was hideous, like poverty, like stench of piss in government hospitals. I recalls her eyes, apple cheeks, her long hair as we fight over a made up game of whose mother is the prettiest. I think of her eyes' buck teeth, but I don't say it out loud. I spare her feelings. My therapist asks me, were you always this sensitive? And I nod in agreement, vigorously. I once cut my 5 fingers for revenge and blamed them on a friend. He cried a lot, so I went to him and fed him snacks with my bandaged fingers and told him horror stories, sitting on his dead Azoba's chair.
Oh my God, that's very intense, isn't it? It's a very intense poem about a lot of things. But has this also was this also published somewhere? Because I think I've
Sangam
read it.
House, Poetry ka
Right.
Sangam.
Yes, of course. Yes, of course. I do remember reading this one and rereading it actually. I read it twice so that uh, I could understand the segues and the sequencing. Uh, can I ask you this question, which in many ways is really I don't know how pertinent it is, but to what extent does poetry serve as a way of emptying out for you? Is it
I
at all that way?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I sometimes feel like I think in verses, uh, like like whatever, like I'm taking a walk and I'm like angry about something, and suddenly like an image would like come up in my head, and I'm thinking of lines or even like a title of like a potential poem, and all the things that I can put into it. Like I think I sort of like channel my rage or despair or like whatever other intense feelings through poetry. And like one of the frustrating things is that like this lockdown period has been so numbing in a way that like I've not been able to do that. And and it's kind of scares me to no end that like have I like am I drained out of all poetry, and will I be able to write again, because like it's just so not happening. This numbness is sort of like eating me away in some sense, and I'm really scared of that. But I mean, yeah, like any intense emotion for me, it sort of functions through poetry, or so far has functioned through poetry.
That's an interesting thing that you mentioned about how you get these phrases or a title or something. So when you're walking, right? If I heard you right,
Yeah, yeah.
so what do you then do? You note them down, you keep them in your head, and come back home and note them down. You put them on your
I
cell
send
phone.
like WhatsApp messages to friends saying, "Keep, don't read it right now." Because I mean, when I'm walking, I don't usually have a pen and paper on me,
Of
and
course,
that Evernote app on my phone is like as good as dead because I don't ever use it. Like WhatsApp has sort of my notepad. So yeah, either I'll do that or like I'll leave like voice notes for myself to revisit. But I mean, yeah, you have to keep it somewhere, otherwise it'll get lost, and then it's sort of gone forever.
absolutely, absolutely. That's something that a lot of people do. Is that this little thing has become a note-taking device for many people,
Essential.
uh, and there have been poetry books that have been written on cell phones, on uh, on word processors on cell phones, on note-taking apps on cell phones. But what is your tool of your weapon or tool of choice? What do you write on? Do you do
Pen and
longhand? Do you
paper,
do pen and
longhand.
paper, longhand?
Yeah. Anything, even the entire book was what like first draft was all on paper. Like whenever I would start anything new every morning, I had to like first write it in my diary and then translate it on paper. And of course, like the two are very different because I think the way of thinking when you're writing on paper is very different. I can't explain how, but it is very different from MS Word thinking. But I mean, yeah, the first raw draft has to be on paper and it has to be written by hand. That's like how I sort of organize my thoughts.
Of course, and there is a certain tactility to it, to the process,
Yeah,
that you are using your body, you're involving your body in the process of thinking as well.
yeah.
You're
It
fashioning
feels more
something.
real, like you feel more involved in the process somehow. Like you
Absolutely.
have higher stakes when you're doing it. Like I felt like two, three journals when I was writing the book. So yeah. And they're all incoherent notes that I'm taking and like scratching, and they're like not worth anything, but like sort of very relevant to the process of writing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. They serve as maybe stepping stones to further development of a thought
Yeah, yeah.
or something. Yeah. I mean, totally. Team pen and paper. So we have about 15 minutes to go. I'd really like about 5 to 10 minutes for question and answers if there are any.
Hmm.
And if there are none, we'll just go ahead with more poetry. But do we have? Would you like to read some more?
Sure. So this is an experimental poem, sort of. It's called Writing Love. These days, it's hard to write about stranger things, like the night jasmine flower and love. So let's not do that yet, because the time isn't right. How can I talk of love when this planet keeps newborns hidden in cocoons that eat them a little each time they move? When ants go to sleep, wherever they go to sleep, what do they dream about? I give myself a scar today. I carve out a name I cannot spell, and honey drips out of my leg. It is why is that why your leg looks swollen? I asks me. The insides of my flesh have developed beehives. Look at all the ants I am attracting. Some yawning for I woke them up before coffee could be served. The babies that come out of these cocoons are often missing limbs. They are reared for certain purposes. There is no free will on this planet. So, how do I talk about love? This one baby was born without a tongue. He talked in whistles, and they all understood his lack of a tongue makes him a good container. He holds inside him a lot of data required to run this planet, where I can't write about love. This planet of 13 moons where I have been exiled is where death comes to die. Babies are dropped headfirst onto the ground so that they can crack their skulls and the brains can grow in size. Babies with big heads and no limbs are efficient janitors and excellent computer programmers. They'd give automatons a run for their money if automatons had any money. Birds don't fly here, they might rip apart the cocoons and disrupt the process of creation. The last time it happened, a bird was sentenced to death. I hear that's better than living on this planet, unless they find a purpose for you. It has just been discovered that I am turning into honey. I am the nourishment this planet does not need. I will be dropped head first, because that's the rule, in my mother's shiny cup she has put out for drying. If I break the china, I'll be exiled again. If I break the skull, I might finally understand what people write when they write about love.
Wow, a lot to a lot to think about there. Uh, is this is a fresh one, right? This is not published yet,
Yeah, yeah, it's been published yet.
and this is
Sort
part of
of,
the collection.
yeah, it'll be a part of the collection. Sort of a response to whatever is happening.
Yeah, I could sense that it was. It is in many ways a politically. It does make a few political statements in a very beautiful way, but I could sense that it was making a political statement. How, to what extent does, speaking of politics, to what extent does uh, politics involve, to, I mean, we are all political creatures, but how does that come through in your poetry in a direct way, in an indirect way?
I don't think I've
And how do
written
you keep,
many. Yeah,
sorry,
sorry.
and how do you keep from, how do you how do you every poet has their own way of escaping the trap of sloganeering.
Yeah.
So have you felt that pull, that urge to somehow, step away from sloganeering but yet be political in your poetry?
I think yes, because I feel like I sort of am too privileged a person to get involved into this whole sloganeering poetry. And this is not a critique of that kind of overtly political poem. But the thing is that, like, I haven't really done anything to be that overtly political. I sort of have to stay true to the person that I am, and therefore I think most of my poems are political in some ways or another. I mean, at least like gender politics plays an important role in my poetry. But in terms of, like, even in this poem where I am sort of talking about fascism in some ways, uh, I don't know. I've not really learned how to deal with subjects like fascism or tyranny in a way that sort of suits my aesthetic sense. So, and like that is important to me. I would not be able to put out any poetry, any work where I don't feel very honest, about the voice. Like my voice is not very,
Absolutely,
yeah,
absolutely. And I mean, that's a very important thing to realize about oneself.
yeah,
The understanding of what one's voice is like, and what registers are most in its ballpark.
yeah.
Although, of course, it's not a wholly conscious process either. It's
No,
just
of course it's
something
not.
that
It's
you
not.
instinctively know.
Yeah. And also, like, there's always like you write something which is overtly political, or which is, trying to make a point, which is more obvious and direct. And I feel like there is always going to be like a voice, like at least it happens in my case, that like it tells me about, like, there is an authenticity meter of sorts in my mind that tells me that, like, okay, this is not sounding like you. I mean, good or bad is really not of any consequence here. So it's a,
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, 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 yeah. We have a certain radar for the kind of thing that sounds like us,
yeah,
that rings true to ourselves, which is most important, I guess,
yeah, yeah,
than
absolutely.
how it'll sound to somebody we don't even know.
Yeah, I mean, that is going to be the case with everything that we write, right? I mean,
So
like,
true.
people are going to like or not like or whatever, judge us for that, but that's very different from how we feel about our work. And that association is very important. Otherwise, I
Absolutely,
don't know how to survive as a writer.
absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. So, with about 7 or 8 minutes to go, do we have any questions? Admins, can you look at the chat box to see if there are any questions? Not as of yet. So, why don't we go ahead with perhaps a poem or two if there is time?
Sure. What poem do you want me to read? I poem, mental health poem?
Totally up to you.
Okay, fine. I'll read a mental health poem because I don't think I've read any as such. It's called Fish Depression is Not Funny. If you put your fish in a bowl, your fish will soon develop depression. So buy a big aquarium if you must buy fishes. A friend recently lost 3 out of 4 fishes she had bought. They died within a week of moving into their new home. One died because it didn't like the water. The other 2, we suspect, committed suicide. If your fish isn't moving much in the tank, it has developed depression. When the first fish was found dead, we all were shocked, but thanked God, for it was the less pretty one. Before I am accused of anthropomorphizing fishes, let me say this: the pretty one was probably cost more, and in a bad economy, that's just no good. The problem with fishes is that they are easily depressed, we deduced. Depression, as we already know, can often be suicidal, and life in a fish tank without fish buddies can be lonely, depressing. So I don't blame the other 2 for dying the way they did, the way only few have courage for. Fish, say scientists, can revolutionize the way we understand depression. For all we know, we are popping the wrong pills. Maybe we don't need clonazepam, certainly not zero point 0.5 mg. We definitely don't need Xanax. Just a healthy dose of suicide can wipe the human race clean of its blues. Let's learn from them fishes. Let's not remove our depression like clothes and throw them in one corner of our empty houses. As is customary for any funeral, my friend and I cracked jokes when her fishes died. Fish 1, what is the bottom of your tank called? Fish 2, the Great Depression. And sang Rihanna songs because the fishes would have liked it. We found love in a hopeless place. But let me assure you, we didn't.
Beautiful, beautiful. Very touching and very dark, but not depressing. That's my impression again. Uh,
That's a good thing. A poem about depression is not depressing, is
yeah.
moment of achievement, I suppose.
Yeah. Would you like to go with one last poem? We have 5 minutes on the clock, so I suppose.
Sure. Okay. For the love of language. 1. I have always felt I am not good with words. There is perhaps nothing more important than words for a writer, and yet I fail at language every day. Growing up in a small town, the world was too small. During my 8th standard geography class, I learned how to pronounce the word island. For I and Baba. The word was island. And so that is what it became for me. In class, when the teacher laughed and corrected me, Manjiri, it's not island, it is island. I pondered upon its selfishness. Why would anyone then say no man is an island? That is what the word is trying to tell us. I don't know about a man, but when I was with you, a lot of the time, this woman was an island. When I became a writer, I realized I will need to use synonyms of words I can't pronounce. My primary school English teacher during recitation taught me how to pronounce the word development. Not development, Manjiri, it's development. Eat some of your vowels for breakfast. All good readers know when to do that. And so I learned to eat vowels for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. As a writer, I sometimes vomit out all the undigested. It is what writers are supposed to do, throw up language for the benefit of mankind. Come revolution, which must be pronounced as revolution, like evolution, we'll need a clear pronunciation more than just a flair for writing. What is written has feet, but what is spoken has wings. I think of how my depression makes makes me metamorphose. Makes me anthropomorphize animals. My fishes have depression like me. My cat talks me out of it. My dog lets me hold him and cry every time I think of you. These are things I can do. What I can't do is pronounce anthropomorphize in front of a sympathetic audience. So I look for synonyms. My fish has human like or Manjiri like depression. My cat talks me out of it the way you would if you were around. My dog lets me hold him and cry, just like you'd let me hold you and cry when things got hard. Now, things are always hard, but at least I have animals I can ascribe another word for anthropomorphize, your attributes and mine. My struggle with language turns into my struggle with love. But ask any writer and they will tell you language is love. I often turn my love for language into the love I once had for you. It's good practice after all. No one otherwise can write the saddest lines without love, without language. Whether or not you read them then is beside the point. When I write, and when some lover somewhere reads it, it becomes his. Many language philosophers will have you believe once I've sent my words out into the void, that is the cosmic universe, they are floating aimlessly for someone to catch them. When I write, I give you up. You metamorphose from my lover to whoever is reading to this today's lover. That is what I do for you, even when you aren't around, especially when you aren't around. Metamorphose, transform, change. Pick a word of your choosing. All I want is for the reader to understand you can love in any language, but losing is standard fare. As innovative as loss can be, it will always sit heavy on you. Let's not complicate it with words you and I can't pronounce properly. What, after all, is the point of being alone if you cannot tell the word you're lonely?
Manjiri Indurkar, thank you so much for this absolutely enriching experience.
Thank you. Thank you
Folks,
for having me over.
this is Pen at Prithvi. We are a fortnightly platform for poets and writers of nonfiction and prose, working from India and beyond, and working in English and other languages. For regular updates, please follow us on our Instagram account, Pen at Prithvi. We are also on Twitter as Pen at Prithvi and on YouTube as Pen at Prithvi webcast. Uh, we will be coming to you with a very full roster for the remainder of the year, and we are also working on next year where we will have a number of big announcements for you. So please stay tuned and please encourage the arts. Manjari, thank you so much. I'll sign off
Thank you.
now. Bye, and please stay tuned, everybody.